It is my honor to welcome you to this historical moment. A special welcome is extended to the State Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Marcus and spouse, Government Commissioner, Ms. Alida Francis, members of the Executive Council, Commissioner Simmons, and Commissioner Schmidt. Today, Prime Minister Mark Rutte will be presenting the Dutch government's reaction to the report, Chains of the Past, Ketenen and Verleden, by the Advisory Board Dialogue with Slavery Past, and will deliver a meaningful message. Following the reaction of the Prime Minister, State Secretary Mr. Martin van der Leyen will further clarify the reaction on behalf of the Netherlands, therewith placing emphasis on the role that the Dutch government played in the slavery past within the Caribbean region of the kingdom. Hereafter, Governor Commissioner Ms. Alida Francis will give a speech of the reaction on the aforementioned. In addition, they would like to discuss how to follow up on the report's recommendations and the Prime Minister's words in the form of a town hall setting. And without any further delay, I implore you to turn your attention to the Prime Minister, Mark Rutte.
Goedemiddag, welkom allemaal hier in het Nationaal Archief in Den Haag. We zijn hier bijeen voor de kabinetsreactie op het rapport Ketenen van het Verleden van de dialooggroep Slavernij. Dus ik wil ook van harte welkom heten de leden van de dialooggroep, maar ook de mensen die betrokken zijn de afgelopen tijd bij gesprekken over dit onderwerp. Uiteraard ook welkom aan de voorzitter van de Eerste en de Tweede Kamer die ik zag en vertegenwoordigers van het parlement. Ook leden van het Nederlandse parlement en vertegenwoordigers van de landen binnen het Koninkrijk. Ook van harte welkom voor de mensen in Nederland die dit via de televisie volgen en online. Maar natuurlijk ook voor de mensen op de eilanden en de landen binnen het Koninkrijk en in Suriname. Zometeen gaat minister-president Mark Rutte een toespraak houden waar hij een toelichting geeft op de kabinetsreactie op het slavernijverleden. En daarna is er de mogelijkheid voor de pers om een aantal één-op-één gesprekken te voeren. En dan eerst voor de aanwezigen hier de mogelijkheid om verder het gesprek voor te zetten, maar zover is het nog niet. Ik geef graag eerst het woord aan minister-president Mark Rutte.
Dames en heren, goedemiddag. En voor iedereen die meekijkt of luistert in een andere tijdzone, goedemorgen, bon dia, good morning. Hier in het Nationaal Archief spreekt de geschiedenis tot ons in miljoenen documenten. En ook al horen we de ongeschreven stemmen uit het verleden niet, het verhaal dat uit al die archiefstukken naar voren komt, is niet alleen maar mooi. Het is vaak ook lelijk, pijnlijk en zelfs ronduit beschamend. Dat geldt zeker voor de rol van Nederland in het slavernijverleden. Wij, levend in het hier en nu, kunnen slavernij alleen in de allerduidelijkste bewoordingen erkennen en veroordelen als misdaad tegen de menselijkheid. Als een misdadig systeem dat wereldwijd onnoemelijk veel mensen, onnoemelijk veel en groot leed heeft gebracht. En dat doorwerkt in de levens van mensen hier en nu. En wij in Nederland moeten ons aandeel in dat verleden onder ogen zien. Daarom is het goed dat we elkaar vandaag in het Nationaal Archief ontmoeten. Hier ligt ons nationale geheugen opgeslagen. Dus dit is de plek voor nationaal gewetensonderzoek. Hier kun je niet om de historische feiten heen. Tot 1814 werden ruim 600.000 tot slaafgemaakte Afrikaanse vrouwen, mannen en kinderen onder erbarmelijke omstandigheden naar het Amerikaanse continent verscheept door Nederlandse slaafhandelaren. De meeste naar Suriname, maar ook naar Curaçao, Eustatius en andere plaatsen. Ze werden weggerukt uit hun families, ontmenselijkt, als vee vervoerd en behandeld. Vaak onder het overheidsgezag van de West-Indische Compagnie. In Azië werden tussen de 660.000 en ruim 1 miljoen mensen, we weten het niet eens precies, verhandeld binnen de gebieden die onder het gezag stonden van het Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie. De getallen zijn onvoorstelbaar. Het menselijk leed dat er achter schuil gaat is nog veel onvoorstelbaar. Talloos zijn de overgeleverde verhalen en getuigenissen die bewijzen hoe er in het slavernijsysteem geen maat stond op wreedheid en willekeur. En dus ook geen maat op onrecht en pure angst. We hoeven alleen maar Anton de Coms bij slaven van Suriname open te slaan om te lezen over de meest gruwelijke behandelingen en straffen. We lezen over gezeling en marteling tot de dood opvolgde. Over mensen van wie ledematen werden afgehakt. Over brandmerken in het gezicht. Het lot van de ene persoon nog verschrikkelijker dan van de andere. Op elke pagina onrecht en nog meer onrecht. En zoals Anton de Kom het beschreef voor Suriname, zo gebeurde het ook elders onder hetzelfde Nederlandse overheidsgezag. We lezen het, we weten het, en toch is het afschuwelijke lot van tot slaaf gemaakte mensen nauwelijks te bevatten. Of neem inderdaad de feiten zoals die uit de archieven spreken. Bijvoorbeeld uit de enorme administratie die is opgezet rond de afschaffing van de slavernij in 1863 en die hier ingezien kan worden. Pagina na pagina staan daarop per plantage en per slaveneigenaar de namen vermeld van tot slaafgemaakte plus nog enkele andere persoonlijke gegevens. Zakelijk, systematisch, in een droge opsomming, die juist daardoor zo confronterend is. Omdat het de absurditeit onderstreept van een systeem waarin de ene mens de andere mens tot handelswaar maakt. Een systeem zo onmenselijk en onrechtvaardig dat in 1863 niet de tot slaaf gemaakten financieel werden gecompenseerd door de staat, maar de slaven-eigenaren. En nog kon het hardvochtiger, nog oneerlijker, want iedereen die in Suriname in 1863 in naam vrij werd, moest gedwongen nog 10 jaar lang onder staatstoezicht blijven werken. De facto betekende dat voor velen nog 10 jaar langer een leven in onvrijheid, een leven onder dwang. Tot 1873. Komend jaar is dat 150 jaar geleden. Die geschiedenis houdt ons bezig. Een complexe geschiedenis waarin op verschillende plaatsen verschillende jaartallen en gebeurtenissen betekenis hebben. Niet alleen 1863 en 1873, maar bijvoorbeeld ook 1860, de wettelijke afschaffing van de slavernij in toenmalig Nederlands-Indië. 1814, het jaar dat ook Nederland de transatlantische slavenhandel afschafte. 1848, toen op Sint Maarten de slavernij de facto voorbij was. Of bijvoorbeeld 1795, toen onder leiding van Tula op Curaçao een opstand plaatsvond die nog jaarlijks wordt herdacht. Eindeloos veel momenten, eindeloos veel verhalen, eindeloos veel geschiedenis. Die geschiedenis krijgt de laatste jaren meer aandacht in tentoonstellingen, in publicaties en ook in het maatschappelijk debat. Er vindt maatschappelijke bewustwording plaats. En daardoor ook een verandering in het denken. Dat is goed en terecht en nodig, want te lang is het stilgebleven. Ik heb die verandering in denken ook persoonlijk doorgemaakt. Daar wil ik open over zijn. Lange tijd dacht ik dat het niet goed mogelijk is op een betekenisvolle manier verantwoordelijkheid te nemen voor iets dat zo lang geleden is en waar niemand van onszelf bij is geweest. Lange tijd dacht ik dus eigenlijk, het slavernijgeleden, dat is geschiedenis die achter ons ligt. Maar ik had het mis. Want eeuwen van onderdrukking en uitbuiting werken door in het hier en nu. In racistische stereotypen. In discriminerende patronen van uitsluiting. In sociale ongelijkheid. En om dat te doorbreken, moeten we ook het verleden open en eerlijk onder ogen zien. Een verleden dat we delen met andere landen, waardoor onze samenlevingen voor altijd op een speciale manier met elkaar zijn verbonden. Het klopt dat niemand die nu leeft persoonlijk schuld draagt voor de slavernij. Maar het klopt ook dat de Nederlandse staat in al zijn historische verschijningsvormen verantwoordelijkheid draagt voor het grote leed dat tot slaafgemaakten en hun nazaten is aangedaan. En dus kunnen we niet voorbij gaan aan de doorwerking van het verleden in onze tijd. Het rapport Ketenen van het Verleden van de dialooggroep Slavernijverleden speelt een belangrijke rol in het bewustwordingsproces dat velen van ons doormaken. Dat rapport verscheen op 1 juli vorig jaar en bevatte een aantal niet mis te verstaande conclusies en aanbevelingen. De 3 kernwoorden zijn erkenning, excuses, herstel. Vandaag sturen we de officiële kabinetsreactie naar de Tweede Kamer. Daarin omarmen we de analyse en conclusies van de dialooggroep. In de tussenliggende 1,5 jaar heeft het kabinet op verschillende manieren, op verschillende plekken en met verschillende mensen en groepen over het slavernijverleden gesproken. Ik ben zelf in september jongstleden in Suriname geweest, waar ik heb geleerd hoe diep de geschiedenis nog altijd ingrijpt in het dagelijks leven van mensen, ook spiritueel. Ik heb ook geleerd hoe ervaringen, herinneringen en gevoelens per groep en per persoon kunnen verschillen. Het maakt uit of je voorouders uit Afrika werden geroofd of behoorden tot de oorspronkelijke bewoners. Het maakt uit in welk land of regio hun leven zich afspeelde. En het maakt ook uit in welke periode ze leefden. Die historische, geografische en culturele verschillen tussen bevolkingsgroepen en mensen, die doen ertoe. Ook in het hier en nu. En dat maakt het doen van algemene uitspraken over het slavernijverleden ook zo kwetsbaar. Want hoe doe je recht aan al die verschillen? Wat is daarvoor het beste moment? Hoe doe je recht aan alle spirituele symbolen en rituelen die in sommige culturen zo enorm belangrijk zijn? En hoe omvat je met woorden zoveel onrecht, zoveel pijn, zoveel gruwelijkheid? Elke poging daartoe zal altijd onvolkomen zijn en nieuwe vragen en discussies oproepen. Met alle emoties die daarbij horen. Met alle beladenheid. We weten dat er niet één goed moment is voor iedereen. Niet de juiste woorden voor iedereen. Niet één juiste plaats voor iedereen. En ik erken dat de aanloop naar deze dag beter had gekund. Maar laat dat geen reden zijn dan maar niets te doen. We moeten met elkaar stappen vooruit zetten. We moeten met elkaar proberen verder te komen. Dus laat ons dat gesprek over het slavernijverleden alsjeblieft voeren. Ook als dat een moeilijk gesprek is. En dat gesprek, dat begint met erkenning. Erkenning van het afschuwelijke leed dat generaties tot slaafgemaakten is aangedaan. Erkenning van en eerherstel voor al die mensen die in het verzet kwamen. Zoals de dappere Mamons van Suriname. Ik noem vandaag met eerbied de namen van Tula op Curaçao, Chaudiqueur, Boni en Baron in Suriname, Wan Teteloke op Sint Maarten. En we gedenken al die naamloos gebleven vrouwen en mannen die door de eeuwen heen heldhaftig de vrijheid zochten. En er vaak op de meest gruwelijke manier voor werden gestraft. En natuurlijk erkenning van historische verantwoordelijkheid. Met de woorden die daarbij horen. Deze woorden. Eeuwenlang hebben de Nederlandse staat en zijn vertegenwoordigers slavernij mogelijk gemaakt, gestimuleerd, in stand gehouden en daarvan geprofiteerd. Eeuwenlang zijn in naam van de Nederlandse staat mensen tot handelswaar gemaakt, uitgebuit en mishandeld. Eeuwenlang is onder Nederlands staatsgezag de menselijke waardigheid met voeten getreden op de meest afschuwelijke manier. En te weinig hebben opeenvolgende Nederlandse regeringen na 1863 gezien en erkend dat het slavernijverleden een negatieve doorwerking had en heeft. Daarvoor bied ik namens de Nederlandse regering excuses aan. Today I apologize. Awe mi tapidi disculpa. Tide Bivani taki pardon. Vandaag bied ik namens de Nederlandse regering excuses aan voor het handelen van de Nederlandse staat in het verleden. Postuum aan alle tot slaafgemaakten die wereldwijd onder dat handelen hebben geleden. Aan hun dochters en zonen. En aan al hun nazaten tot in het hier en nu. We doen dit niet om schoon schip te maken. Niet om het verleden af te sluiten en achter ons te laten. We doen dit, en we doen dit nu, om staande op de drempel van een belangrijk herdenkingsjaar samen de weg vooruit te vinden. We delen niet alleen het verleden, maar ook de toekomst. Dus zetten we vandaag een komma, geen punt. Het gesprek over het slavernijverleden moet zo breed mogelijk worden gevoerd. Niet alleen in Nederland, maar juist ook op de plekken waar het gebeurde. Met iedereen die betrokken is of zich betrokken voelt. Daarom klinken de excuses die ik net uitsprak vandaag door op 7 andere plekken in de wereld. Daar waar de pijn en de gevolgen van het slavernijverleden tot de dag van vandaag het meest worden gevoeld en het meest zichtbaar zijn. Ze klinken door in de woorden die worden uitgesproken door 7 vertegenwoordigers van de Nederlandse regering. In Suriname, op Curaçao, op Sint Maarten, op Aruba, op Bonaire, op Saba en op Sint Eustatius. De regering wil in overleg met alle groepen en mensen uit alle landen waarmee wij dit verleden delen, intensiever werken aan meer kennis over het slavernijverleden en dus aan meer bewustwording, erkenning en begrip. Dat proces vraagt tijd en we kunnen het werk alleen in gezamenlijkheid doen. Op weg naar die belangrijke symbolische datum, 1 juli 2023. Daarna in het hele herdenkingsjaar. En in de jaren die daarop volgen. De kabinetsreactie op het rapport van de dialooggroep Slavernijverleden gaat hier uitvoerig op in. Het belangrijkste is dat we alle stappen die we gaan zetten ook echt gezamenlijk zetten. In overleg, luisterend en met als enige intentie recht doen aan het verleden, heling in het heden. Een komma, geen punt. Met Suriname, met de Caribische delen van het Koninkrijk en met alle nazaten in Nederland werken we aan zichtbaarheid van erfgoed, aan bewustwording via onderwijs en aan wetenschappelijk historisch onderzoek. Tijdens het herdenkingsjaar zullen alle facetten van het slavernijverleden en de doorwerking in onze tijd in het volle licht staan. De koning voelt zich persoonlijk zeer betrokken bij het onderwerp en zal op 1 juli aanwezig zijn bij de herdenking en viering in Amsterdam. En we kijken verder, over 2023 heen. Een onafhankelijk en breed samengesteld herdenkingscomité buigt zich over de beste manier om ook in de toekomst waardig en zoveel mogelijk gezamenlijk te herdenken. En er komt een fonds voor maatschappelijke initiatieven in het hele Koninkrijk en Suriname, waarmee de doorwerking van het slavernijverleden de zichtbaarheid, de aandacht en aanpak krijgt die nodig is. Het helingsproces moet nu beginnen. En het programma daarvoor schrijven we samen. Dames en heren, het boek van onze gedeelde geschiedenis kent veel pagina's die ons levend in de 21ste eeuw met verbijstering en afschuw vervullen. En met diepe schaamte. Die pagina's wissen we met excuses niet uit. En dat is ook niet de bedoeling. We kunnen het verleden niet veranderen. Alleen onder ogen zien. Wat de regering vurig hoopt, wat ik ook persoonlijk vurig hopen, is dit moment, dat deze dag ons helpt, koninkrijksbreed en samen met Suriname en andere landen de open pagina's die voor ons liggen in te vullen met dialoog, erkenning en heling. Dank u wel.
Mag ik graag iedereen die genodigd is uitnodigen om nog bij koffie en een drankje met elkaar in gesprek te gaan. En dan zal voor de pers de mogelijkheid zijn om enkele 1-op-1 vragen te stellen waarbij de televisie daar zal worden gepositioneerd en de schrijvende pers daar in die hoek. Dank u wel voor.
Thank you, Prime Minister. At this time, I would like to acknowledge our Island Council members, Ms. Verleden and Ms. Spano. I now invite State Secretary Mr. Magnus van Rij to present his speech.
Thank you. Dear station residents, a walk across Eustatius is a walk through history. Your walk takes you past slave walks, the remains of walls built by enslaved people, one stone at a time in the scorching sun. If you're lucky on your walk, or while scuba diving in the sea, you find a blue bead. The beads given to enslaved people with which to barter amongst themselves. The same beads they threw into the sea after the abolition of slavery as a symbol of their freedom, as legend says. It's sad that if you find a blue bead, it means Stasia has found a place in your heart, and you will return someday. My wife, Courtney, has found several of them, and the saying has proven to be true for us. Anyone who has an eye for history can see its traces everywhere. Until recently, though, the history books didn't tell the story of the enslaved people. They focused on the island's other story, a story of the 18th century, when St. Eustatius was an important trade hub, with ships coming and going, and shops and warehouses filled with spices, silverware, tobacco, silk, and many other goods. A story of a small island that played a major role in world history when it fired the first salute on the 16th of November 1776, becoming the first foreign country to recognize a naval ship of the United States of America. In recent years, many people, including myself, have turned their attention to the island's other story. An extremely shameful story. The trading vessels that came and went were often loaded with human cargo, branded, shackled, and sold as if they were objects. Not people with needs, feelings, emotions, and pride. Some were set to work here on the island's plantations, but many more were sold on. They had been wrenched from their birthplace and their families. And upon arrival here, husbands, wives, and children were often cruelly separated. It made Eustatius one of the world's main slave trade hubs. Eustatius' huge history, including its darkest pages. And we must not close our eyes to that fact, even though confronting the past can be very painful, especially for the descendants of enslaved people. It made a huge impression on my wife and I during the period when I was government commissioner. In the Netherlands, we read about the history. We learn about it and we talk about it. But it is an intellectual experience. Here on the island, we can feel the history and it touches the heart. Because of the silent witnesses all around the island, but even more because of the conversations with you, its residents. The past has not disappeared from your stories and your personal histories for those who are able and willing to talk about it. Many of you have forebears who were enslaved. Some of you still own the name of a plantation owner. Some of you were confronted with this history when you saw excavations taking place. Perhaps it was your forebears who were buried there. I often think back to a conversation I had with Ishmael Burgle, who is here present. He told me and my wife about something his grandmother experienced as a mother around the turn of the 20th century when she was out on the land with her son, 10 years old, picking sea grapes and putting them in a basket, which she carried on her head. There, at the side of the sea, something she had never forget. A white Dutchman looked down on them, literally, from his horse, and spoke to her and her son with contact. She couldn't remember maybe the exact word, but she remembered how they made her feel. And she also remembered her son's 10 years old precise words afterwards. He said, "When I grow up, we will buy this land." And that's what happened. The family still owns it, and Ishmael lives there today. The story made an impression on me. It made an impression because it shows the resilience of the people on station who didn't give up, but instead took control of their fate with high integrity and pride. And also because it showed that the abolition of slavery didn't bring an end to the patterns, behavior, and divisions of racism. That people still faced prejudice, racism, and stereotyping to this day. Eustatius, you, the people of this beautiful island, are aware of the history. That's why you mark Emancipation Day on the 1st of July, a day of celebration and a day of liberation. Happy July Day, as the older generations would sing. I'm delighted that last year, under the leadership of Alida Francis and with the support of the employers, the trade unions, and the Island Council, the 1st of July became an official holiday on Eustatius. The day on which 160 years ago, next year, enslaved people threw their blue beads into the sea as a symbol of their regained freedom. The past has not gone away, the Dutch state has denied its role in the history of slavery, and for too long it has not been willing to see the effects that the history continues to have. And that's why Prime Minister Mark Rutte apologized on behalf of the Dutch government. Posthumously to enslave people everywhere in the world who suffered as a consequence of the Dutch state's past actions, as well as to their daughters and sons and to all their descendants, right up to present day. That includes many of you here today. The Prime Minister had also said that with this apology we are not writing a full stop but a comma. This apology is a beginning. It is a starting point for us to enter into a dialogue with you about what this apology means and how together we can give it substance, depth and weight. An apology must go beyond mere words. It's what comes next that gives the words the true meaning. Not just in the year of commemoration that starts on the 1st of July 2023 or in the run-up to that date, but afterwards too. The process of healing and reconciliation takes time. The Dutch state will make funds available to enhance our shared knowledge of the past and to strengthen our collective awareness, to create space for commemoration and acknowledgement. For St. Eustatius, it means that we want to fulfill the wish to create a memorial for the forebears whose remains were found at various burial grounds. We want to do so respectfully in a way that their descendants consider appropriate. But the most important thing is that you, the people of Statia, will decide where this memorial is created and what form it should take and what other actions should be taken. In addition, we will make funds available to support the Statia Cultural Heritage Implementation Committee in protecting the island's heritage in consultation, of course, with you, the people of Statia. Again, it will be up to you to shape this support in a way that does justice to the past and gives meaning to the future, a shared future within the kingdom. And I'd very much like to start that future today, here in the Lion's Den, by giving you all the opportunity to respond, share your feelings, talk and debate. I feel honored to be having the first dialogue with you here on this island that has a place in my heart. An island where in the difficult times at the start of the pandemic, I experienced such an incredible sense of solidarity. The solidarity of people who know that some forces are stronger than individuals. And I hope to find that same solidarity as we deal with the past and as we join together for the next year's commemorative events. The same solidarity that can be heard every day in the wonderful musicality of this island. I'd like to close with a passage from the poem Freedom Song by Islander Roosevelt Blake. There were human beings, yes, human beings, but slaves without a choice. They were denied of their basic right to live and make a choice. They were told that to be slaves is what God made them for, to be slaves and to live in huts and be somebody's property. Blake ends her poem as follows: and sing with might and dignity the song, our freedom song. Lift every voice and sing, yes, then, and only then, we will be free. Yes, truly free. Thank you.
Deputy State Secretary Andre, Government Commissioner Ms. Francis, I now invite you forward.
Fellow station residents, the atrocities committed against enslaved people and Africans in the Caribbean, including the Dutch Caribbean and Suriname, are too many to count. We know of the long hours our ancestors were forced to work in unforgiving sunshine to enrich the enslavers. We shall never forget the many revolting and abominable acts of cruelty inflicted on our people. According to oral tradition, Mr. Moore, the owner of the Golden Rock Plantation, took pleasure in whipping the enslaved. Jim was one of the enslaved men Mr. Moore took pleasure seeing get whipped. Mr. Moore even had his own designated slave whipper to inflict the harshest punishment on those that toiled on his plantation. Here on St. Eustatius, we are also familiar with Gallows Bay, where the owner of Mansion Plantation publicly hanged an enslaved man. The enslaved man's grievous fault was that he was unable to save the plantation's owner's wife from her attackers, even though he had saved the owner's son. These stories symbolize the cruelty inflicted on our people. But let us not forget the brave, enslaved men and women of St. Eustatius who revolted on June 12, 1848. This uprising on St. Eustatius was a bloody wake-up call to the colonial government to stop dragging its feet about abolishing slavery, so that our enslaved people who gave their lives for our lives did not do so in vain. It was these sacrifices that fired up the abolition agenda and made it an urgent issue within the kingdom, from Willemstad to The Hague, from The Hague to Suriname, and from The Hague to our very own Oranjestad. The revolt was not in vain. The revolt was led by our very own, a free man of color, Thomas du Boissoit, whose descendants are still represented among our population today. We also know the names of 5 enslaved leaders that joined du Boissoit: Abraham, Valentine Schmidt, Prince, Oscar, and Joseph. They led their fellow men to the house of the governor, Johannes de Veer, to demand their freedom. Their bravery is what helped to accelerate the process of the freedom we enjoy today. And so today, 159 years after the Dutch abolished slavery, on behalf of the national government, the Prime Minister has expressed the willingness to address the atrocities inflicted on our people. Saying sorry means you have acknowledged that you have done me harm and that you will do better. So how do you foster meaningful dialogue? How do you repair the damage? How do you promote healing? How do you ensure that we as a people can breathe again? Having heard the Prime Minister's response to the report, Chains of the Past, we, the people of St. Eustatius, acknowledge the response. Though we acknowledge, what happens next? How do we move forward together? This response, however imperfect the timing, presents another opportunity for the Dutch Kingdom to craft a future that is meaningful and acceptable. For us in St. Eustatius, we firmly request the Dutch Cabinet not to move too fast and do not move without us. For history has taught us that the decisions made for us must include us. It is true that we are one kingdom, but our kingdom is diverse, it is colorful, and it is also complex. Therefore, the approach must be as diverse as the kingdom is. As we clarify the relationship with the Netherlands in the context of slavery past, St. Eustatius will require a tailor-made approach by us and for us. Statia has a unique history, having changed hands 22 times between different European powers, 22 times. There is no other partner in this kingdom that can make such a claim. Therefore, a unique approach to Statia and the past of slavery. And every voice must be heard. Every voice. The cheerleaders and those who are still pained and unhappy. The highly opinionated and those that are yet to form an opinion. Those who are fully aware and those who are still unaware. The people in culture and agriculture, in education, in the economic sector, in politics, in sports, and in entertainment. Every station voice is important in the process, and each one must carry weight. Today, December 19th, 2022, is another historic day in the kingdom. Today can be the beginning of a new chapter in our history if we are genuine in our approach. We must therefore each commit ourselves on both sides of the ocean, in the Netherlands and here on St. Eustatius, that no matter how difficult the conversation becomes, we will remain at the table. No matter how difficult the conversation becomes, we must remain at the table. Let us make use of this response for the beginning of meaningful change in the relationship between Statia and the Netherlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Government Commissioner Francis. At this time, we will have a brief musical intermission as we prepare for the town hall. At this time, I would like to introduce our panel members for this morning. State Secretary Feri, I would invite you to come forward. Government Commissioner Francis, and our executive member, Commissioner Simmons. It is my pleasure this morning to present to you the moderator for the town hall meeting, Commissioner Schmidt.
Good morning. All in chorus, not the weight of history can be crushing sometimes. You've heard a lot here this morning, lots of words by the Prime Minister. You've heard the presentation by the State Secretary, Alex Van Rey, the response of the station government by Government Commissioner Alida Francis. Lots of words were shared with you, and I'm sure those words mean a lot of different things for each and every one of you. Everyone would take those words to mean something different, to contain for some, whether it is hope, whether it is reparation, whether it is just the acknowledgement of what took place in our history. Each of us will take something different from what was said here today. But as the Prime Minister said, the facts are there. The facts cannot be disputed. From the National Archives where he spoke, he told us the facts are all written there for all of us who want to know more. We can get the facts. And we already know a lot of things. He spoke also about the numbers. I mean, 600,000 taken, and that is by the Dutch alone. Imagine, add to that the British and the French and the Portuguese and the Spanish and all the others who took their share of our ancestors from Africa. It is, for me, in a way, incomprehensible that this and these atrocities, lasted so long. We had a Second World War that lasted 5 years. That is, for some, perhaps an eternity, living through that. Imagine slavery. Didn't last 10 years, 20 years, another 50 years, but went on for hundreds of years. Just imagine. And during all that time, although folks stood up from time to time to rebel, there were those, the majority, who just didn't want to hear it, didn't want to listen, didn't thought anything was wrong. But it had lasted hundreds of years. Incomprehensible. But anyway, you're not here to listen to me this morning. We have the panel here. Mr. Andre, the State Secretary, well known to us here at Station. Welcome back. We have Government Commissioner Alida Francis and Mr. Simmons, who is our Commissioner of Culture. As I said, what you heard today could mean a lot of things for different peoples. It might be emotional for some. We just ask that we take part in the discussion in a respectful way. You know, share your insights, your vision, your views, your opinion, whatever. Direct your questions to the panel, and yeah, let us have a little conversation. We didn't want to just throw all of this information on you and don't give you an opportunity to release something back. So this is your opportunity to release something. Okay? So are we going to go direct into questions? Is there anyone who would like to say something? There are some microphones that can come to you, wherever you are seated, and you can make a comment, anything you would like to say or state, or direct a question to the panel.
Good morning. I listened to Mark Rutter, Mr. Malik Soiree, and our Government Commissioner, Mrs. Francis. I thank you all for listening today. Question I have, we have heard the response from the Prime Minister. There's planning, dialoguing, you know, total inclusion, we hope. I have a question pertaining to the future. Will this be, because today Mark Rutte is the Prime Minister. Maybe tomorrow, maybe with the next election, there might be a change of government. There might be another Prime Minister who thinks differently. Is there any guarantee? What guarantee is there? Is there anything that is going to be anchored in legislation, laid down in legislation to guarantee, to ensure that this pattern that we are getting on to right now, where we are placing the comma, not a full stop, you know, that indeed we will continue and work out around this comma moving forward, so that all of us, all the cultures, all of the different social, economical involvement persons, that there will be some form of satisfaction, you know, in a proper even reparations, you know, as we talked about, etc.
So directed to anyone on the panel, anyone would like to address that?
Shall I try to give the first answer? It's a very good question, Idris, because a day like this is a very important day, but as Glenn also said, it's a lot of words, but it's more than words. It's also not only this government, and a government in the Netherlands is not only the cabinet. These words have been spoken on behalf of the government, and the king also includes the government. So it's not just a cabinet. The cabinet comes and goes. But in our constitution, actually, the king is there for a longer time than the political, the cabinets which are formed on the basis of the outcome of elections. That's one. Secondly, in the letter to Second Chamber, it's also written that funds are made available, and also that will be by law anchored, as you said. So that has to pass, of course, second chamber and first chamber in Dutch Parliament. But this cabinet, which I'm a member of, are strongly convinced that we are doing here the right thing, and that we have also to pass that through legislation. That it's not only a statement made on one day, but it's the beginning, hopefully, of a future based on dialogue, where I also would like to stress that in a dialogue you have to respect each other, and the position of the Dutch cabinet is to listen, and also to listen here, and to form that dialogue together, step by step, as Alida Francis also just said. So a guarantee, you asked for a guarantee. I think this should be a turning point in Dutch history, and I'm strongly convinced that a large majority of the Dutch population in the Netherlands also support this.
I would like to also add a point to the question of Idris, which I think is a question on the minds of almost everyone seated here. I think what is important as a point of departure is to recognize that the members of Parliament and the Dutch central government, they also represent us here on St. Eustatius. It is up to us as island people of St. Eustatius, as well as our representatives in the Island Council and the Executive Council, as we move forward in the dialogue to ensure that this topic remains on the front burner. That is why I said, particularly as we start the conversation, because it's a very difficult conversation to have, but any time we get at that table and the conversation becomes difficult, we should not throw the table over. We should stay there, go through the dialogue, ask all the right questions, but also listen to each other attentively. And I think what Marnix has said as well, the tone of voice is going to be very important. Of course, we cannot determine how everyone feels, but there must be an opportunity for every voice to be heard. So the emphasis is we have to continue to let our voices be heard.
Good day, everyone. I always say action speaks louder than words. And I don't mean that in a rhetorical way. But if we look back at Thursday past, we had a day that called Kingdom Day, Statuta. Some persons, I believe the majority of persons that live within that kingdom don't even know what that day is about. And probably persons didn't even realize it was a holiday. But I say that to say this. That day was supposed to, I think it was November 15, 1954, was supposed to be the day that symbolized the end of colonialism, but it wasn't. And so we're here in 2002, still celebrating a day, 2022, sorry, celebrating a day that throughout the kingdom that doesn't mean much for persons that live within that kingdom. And you ask yourself, where is the action behind those words? So based on the words we heard today, I believe, I hope that there will be action, not just words.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. is there on the right.
Good morning. My question is for Mr. throughout slavery. And my question is more about what is taking place now. While the Netherlands has acknowledged the atrocities, I have not heard any acknowledgement for the atrocities that are happening now. Our parents, our forefathers, our ancestors were treated as animals. They were treated as if they had no rights. And currently, station citizens, Dutch citizens from the Dutch Caribbean are still treated that way. Students who travel to the Netherlands do not get a BSN number, thereby already beginning an incredible task with a big backlog. When kids go there, they're stuck, they can't open bank accounts, they can't fully write into schools, they can't get their apartment set up, all because they don't have a BSN number, even though we're Dutch citizens, and in the West Islands, we are a part of the Netherlands, yet we are treated as second-class citizens. The 4th of May is a day in the Netherlands that is celebrated in a way to look back on things that happened during the Second World War, yet I see no willingness, save for today, to look back and look forward. Our students are truly suffering, the station citizens who don't have proper health care, we don't have a social minimum, we don't have any of the things that the Dutch citizens, European Dutch citizens have. I question you now on asking, now that you've acknowledged what happened in the past, are you also prepared to acknowledge that we are still living in a form of slavery because we cannot move forward in the same way our ancestors could not?
Yeah, and thank you very much for the question.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. First of all, I would like to say that, as you know, there's of course differences between the West Islands, so Bonaire, St. Eustatius and Saba, which are part of the Caribbean Netherlands since 1010, and part of the Netherlands. You have the European part and you have the Caribbean part of the Netherlands. I, of course, have experienced here when I worked here, that, as you just mentioned, that there are differences in the legal system, and some differences are just the result of the legislative process of at the beginning of the 1st of January 2011. And I think it's very important what you just said, that a couple of these differences, they don't make sense. They don't make sense from the perspective here on the islands, and you mentioned a couple of them. And that is where we have to work constantly, and that's of course the colleague in the cabinet who's responsible for that, Alexandra van Heuvelen, who is coordinating, she's responsible for kingdom relations. I'm here also today with a delegation later on, also to discuss some differences which are actually in my portfolio, which is tax finance. And we should not only address them, a letter was also sent by the Executive Council about that, but we should, and that's exactly what Mr. Derrickson says, it's also about actions. So, you know a little bit my attitude. I don't beat around the bush. We have to address it, and you gave a couple of good examples, and we have to solve a couple of these differences. And if we cannot solve them, then we should make clear why. For example, your example of the students going to the Netherlands, all the difficulties just to get the BSN number, the bank accounts, speaking of banking system, all the banking problems here in the Dutch Caribbean, that should be solved, and that's easily said, and I know that the previous cabinets also have tried it, but I will do my utmost best to get these differences, which don't make any sense in legislation, and I can mention a longer list than you did, that we work on take back when I go to the Netherlands. And you can always, as you know, call me on it.
Anyone else on the panel want to react? If not, we have some other questions in the back. Okay, question in front.
Good morning. My name is Alice Vanna, for those who don't know. I would like to start by thanking actually the Dutch government for actually making this move and this step. It has been long awaited. And I would also like to mention, this does not mean that I accept the apology. It means that I have an open mind towards it. And as it was mentioned a few times before, the actions behind this apology is what means a lot. My sister in the back there mentioned a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I wanted to comment on a few things that I heard. There's legislation going to be put in place in terms of moving forward. These legislations, to me, should come in a form, as it was mentioned by the government commissioner, Ms. Francis. We should be included. There is no one in The Hague that knows what is best for Statia people other than Statia people. And I think this needs to be a clear message sent to the Netherlands based on their track record that this must happen. It is not the concept of we bepaald. It is about our lives. We should have an input in it. And as again I say, I would like to thank you for apologizing, and we would look forward, at least myself, I'll be open and looking forward to what comes after this.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. First of all, the way how you phrased it, that you said that you acknowledge that the apologies are done by the Dutch government, by the Prime Minister, who speaks on behalf of the full Dutch government, and that you are open for the next steps. And I think that is also what I fully understand. And I also fully understand, having worked here together with you, that was also the reason when they asked me to become a government commissioner in late 2019, that I said I only want to do it when I can work together with the people here. I only want to do it when I can live on the island, and I only want to do it when my deputy at that moment is from the island. And I only want to work together with the political leaders working up to into the elections of the Island Council on the 21st of October 2021. So I'm fully aware of what you're saying. Only here, being on the island, knowing the situation, it's not, let's say, some people making some laws in The Hague, not knowing the situation on the island. I always got the support, and Anita Francis too, in her role as Deputy Government Commissioner, and now as Government Commissioner. And I just want to make use of the opportunity that I'm extremely proud that she is the Government Commissioner, and I'm extremely proud that there is an Island Council, and I'm extremely proud there's commissioners, Mr. Smith and Mr. Sivens, and that there's new island elections coming up in March. But it's also the Ministry of BZK, and you could see me as one of the people maybe in The Hague who are defending what you're saying. And not only for St. Eustatius, also for the other islands and also for the other countries in the kingdom.
Any other reactions from the panel? If not, we have a question in the back. Two questions in the back.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to all. And my name is Ketenen, and I'm from the National Party Ubuntu Connected Front. I'm also president of the St. Eustatius African Background Alliance. I like to emphasize always on openness and transparency. It appears to me, Mr. Van Rij, before I start my reaction towards the so-called apology from Mr. Prime Minister Mark Rutte, you address Mr. Smith and Mr. Simmons as Mr. and our honorable sister, Mrs. Alida Francis, as Alida Francis. That's very peculiar, but that's an observation. I would like to start to say, in memory of our warriors, our African ancestors who fought against colonial rule for our freedom today, the following in regard to this so-called apology. We will not accept the excuse or special message for the Dutch slavery past that you are going to pronounce on behalf of the Dutch state today, December 19, 2022. This is in reaction to Mr. Mark Rutte. The reason for this rejection to his excuse is prompted by the following. Mr. Mark Rutte has previously, and his successive cabinet and government has never seen the descendants of enslaved people as full citizens of a society. Time and time again, he insulted the descendants of enslaved people and our citizens of African descent in his policies, laws, and regulation, as well as openly in the media. In 2001, slavery and the slave trade, including the transatlantic slave trade, which declared a crime against humanity by the UN, we recall that the state of the Netherlands voted against the resolution in this vote. That's just a point which we like to bring forward as well. Very important when we speak about legislation and execution of legislation. His cabinet and the government subsequently failed to implement the UN International Year for People of African Descent in 2011, which include the terms of recognition, justice, and development. Prime Minister Rutte cabinet and his government did not establish a national action plan in the subsequent UN International Decade of 2015 following up to 2024 for people of African descent, with the same terms and baptized of reparation decade. Prime Minister Rutte, cabinet and his government recently voted in Geneva, not too long ago, in October 2022, less than 2 months ago, against the UN resolution against the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism, global racism, and discrimination. Mr. Mark Rutte and his government has never given subsequently response to our question from the civil society about the annual use of the golden goods on Princess Dark, even though the king has never responded to our request or formally distanced himself from the golden goose today as we speak. Prime Minister, in 2013, said that Black Pete is black, and the state in July 2020 that your cabinet sees nothing in Dutch apologies for the slavery past because it would only have a polarizing effect in our memory of, despite the recent U-turn. Finally, Prime Minister Rutte announced during the week press conference on Friday, last Friday, in which you indicate that after apologizing, the cabinet and the government will not transfer reparation, running the most criminal enterprises in Dutch history. Not only is this an insult of our descendants of enslaved people in our country, the cabinet and the government are also denying that the same history and its impact in the present. Prime Minister Rutte stated that no reparation in the form of payment in areas of wages of for enslaved people will be paid is also proof to us that the colonial action his predecessors based on racism are also in full swing with his and his cabinet and government as such. Finally, yeah, I have a few final points, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm aware of that. Yeah. The preparation leading up to this day have also clearly shown that your cabinet and government have not understood what the dossier is essentially about: recognition, justice, and development. For example, conclusions of ongoing investigation into the slavery past will not be included. Now, I will end here and I will address a few points to you, Mr. Van Rij, because in your statement, you said shameful history as a whole. When you speak about shameful history as a whole, you're speaking about a people as a whole in the kingdom. We as African descendants have nothing to be ashamed of. So I find that's a very peculiar way of wording in the context of semantically speaking, putting actually to some psychological degree an element of, to the descendants, that they have something to be ashamed of, which cannot be the case. So those wording I personally resent. You also did not mention the West Indies Company, which was
you have a few more points, Mr.
Yes, I'm
Kugale?
finalizing.
Finalizing.
Please do not put psychological pressure on me.
I want to give Mr. Van Rij a chance to answer.
I would like to make my case. Okay, please, thank you very much. What you didn't mention is the hundreds of ships which came to St. Eustatius and unleashed, or unload rather, by way of the West Indies Company, our ancestors, which were distributed throughout the rest of the Americas as a center point. And finally, and this is finally, we are speaking about the 6 islands. We speak constantly about St. Eustatius, Saba, and Bonaire. The 6 islands are part of the Dutch kingdom, and they should be addressed as such. And I find when we speak about this recovery or reparation or excuse, it should be also added to our mother country, which the Dutch and the European countries still continue to plunder and exploit today as we speak. We have in the Netherlands what we call Koninklijke Shell oil, for instance. Well, the Netherlands does not produce any oil, but it's all taken from our motherland up until today. So our wealth which has been stolen continue to be stolen. And like our young sister mentioned, we are seen in the Netherlands, students go to the Netherlands and being criminalized because we are not even being recognized as equal citizens. So colonialism is live and kicking today. And a nice romantical speech here today does not actually constitute the reality. So I thank you for listening, and those are our remarks.
And in that statement which you just were reading, I'm not going to react, of course, line by line, but it's pretty clear that you don't agree with a lot which this cabinet and other cabinets have done. But I really would like also to invite you to start that dialogue, because that is part of a process, and of course you have strong opinions, and I respect that, but I also hope that you will enter that dialogue also with respect towards the Dutch cabinet. But I'm not going to react point by point on your statement. I really would like to receive it, and I promise also that I will. There there's also civil servants here from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. I will pass it on also to the State Secretary who is responsible, and I will give it as a feedback from this meeting, of course, when we have the cabinet meeting, the first cabinet meeting, when we are discussing this. Then you had some personal points based on my speech. Well, I feel sorry if my words have been interpreted like you did, that I was talking about a shameful history. Of course, I'm talking about shameful history on behalf of the Dutch who had done that, and not for all the people who are now living in the kingdom. So if you wanted me to be a little bit more precise there, I should have done that. So I think your interpretation was for sure not meant to be. Yeah, and then your other points, I mentioned in the speech explicitly that the enslaved people were traded on from here. And the Prime Minister explicitly mentioned in his speech about the West Indies companies and the role of the West Indies companies. So I absolutely do see your point there, that the historical facts here should also be mentioned in the next step of the dialogue. I'm the last person, let's say, to ignore the role of the West Indies companies on this island. And the Prime Minister also explicitly mentioned, he mentioned Curaçao and St. Eustatius when we were talking about the islands, of which bad role they played, the West Indies companies, in the whole slave trade. So we are fully aware of that, and we really would like to continue also the dialogue, and that's basically the major message I'm getting here, and I fully understand it, that it's, yeah, okay, it's nice, it's a first step, it's words, but what's next and what are the actions? So thank you very much for your contribution, and I will give the feedback to the Dutch cabinet on the basis of your statement.
Any other reaction from the panel? No, if not, we have another question in the back.
I am Petra. I am also part of the Ubuntu Connected Front to refresh your memories on the national elections in 2021 on St. Eustatius. I am also part of the St. Eustatius Heritage and Implementation Committee, who is working on the recommendations of the report regarding the excavations in 2021. I won't make it too long because the chair already mentioned a lot. The two things I would like to comment on, and that is one, it was said that descendants of colonizers came to St. Eustatius and thought it was okay to excavate the African people who were buried at the Golden Rock cemetery. It was no questions asked to the community, no consent was asked, and that also had to do with colonial mindset, with racism. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we started fairly late, seeing the fact that slavery was abolished like 150 years ago. Another point I would like to make is the 200 million. I think that is different in English, but I would like the government of Mr. Conrad and the capacity. Golden Rock is a term used for St. Eustatius from the colonizer perspective. It was a golden rock back then. The Dutch people, also the English, they profited greatly from St. Eustatius. So, in my opinion, the 200 million is a one-time thing, as far as I understood, and it should be. It's enough. I think it should be way more. The fund should be bigger. It should be structural. And I think we will need a debate on that too. Thank you very much.
Microphone, yes. your reaction?
I will give a reaction. I'm happy that you raised the issue regarding structural funding. You may recall that in Parliament on June 27th this year, I was able to be part of a group there that spoke at Parliament on the same issue of slavery past and the role of the Dutch government in slavery in our islands. And exactly what you're saying is one of the positions that I presented. You may see that today as the Executive Council, what we said is that we acknowledge the response. We did not take the step further to say we accept the apology because we did not have that mandate from the wider community. Because of the pace with which the entire apology has come, looking at the timing, I would not say it's inappropriate, but we as St. Eustatius need a little more time among ourselves to be able to gather our thoughts, get all the different input so that we can, in the process of communicating and dialoguing with the central government on the apology and the available funding, that we are well prepared. So it's going to take a lot of effort, like you said. You may recall in that presentation I talked about structural funding, because our island in its development has been somewhat impeded. We have a lot of institutions here that are doing good work, but simply cannot take it to the next level because they don't have the structural funding. We are right now having organizations that we are only able to pay salaries to keep these organizations operational. But these organizations can mean so much more for the development of our island. We look at our schools, the history that is being taught in our schools. This creates an opportunity for us to revamp the type of history that is being taught to our children. We look at the institutional strengthening and the capacity building of our institutions. A lot of work is being done on a voluntary basis, and we simply cannot take it to the next level. As you may recall, in my response on behalf of the island today, that is why we said, don't move too fast. Let us be part of the process. And we also heard that from Mr. Verleden, and it is also confirmed by the Prime Minister that they do intend to do that. I want to, though, make use of this opportunity to appeal to us as stations. While we may have different opinions, different ideologies, I think on a topic as important as this one, it is my hope that we will come together on the things that need to unite us on this particular topic. Especially because we see throughout our kingdom and Suriname, there's a whole lot of activity ongoing, and we're going to have a lot of voices, and every voice must be heard. But here on station, it is important that we come together as soon as possible. My colleagues in the Island Council, Glenn Smith and Derek Simmons, commissioners, we sat and we confronted ourselves with this whole topic. And we have some clear ideas that we believe going forward in the dialogue up with the Netherlands that should be put on the front burner. However, we do not want to do this without speaking to all the stakeholder groups and without speaking with the Island Council. We had hoped in the past 2 weeks we would have been able to do that. Again, time constraints did not allow us, but do not for a moment think that we will not have that conversation with the stakeholders. And you are indeed correct, Petra Ploeg, that you are a part of the St. Eustatius Cultural Heritage Implementation Committee. I'm happy that you and your organization accepted our request to be part of this committee, because this committee has the responsibility to look at the recommendations of the Eustatius Heritage Research Committee and work towards the implementation. And as we work towards the implementation, funding will be necessary. You will see further that in the response, we as St. Eustatius said clearly, we hope that the Dutch, we request the Dutch cabinet to look at station in a different way. In a different way than any other part of our kingdom, because there is no one who can make claim to the history that we have and the role that we have played in the transatlantic slave trade. In that, we have had the involvement of the French, the Dutch, the Spanish, as well as the English. So again, this positions Statia, and I think it speaks to what Kenneth Cuvelet has tried to say. It's broader than just the Dutch. The role that Statia has played, there were so many different powers in our island for hundreds of years, and that also has a very long tail. So there, we have so many conversations we will need to have. We may even need to have the conversation regarding the role of Statia in helping America, and as a result, our island's economy being plundered, and the economical consequences and the decline of Statia's economy. That is another added point that we may need to have as stations as we address this whole issue of the apology and how do we move forward. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm personally looking forward to the conversations with everyone.
Any other reactions from the panel, Mr. Members? Not. Just a notice to those, there are some folks sitting on the outside. If you also have any questions you would like to ask, you can just come to the door. There's a microphone on the right at the inside of the door. You can also come there and pose your questions. Another question.
I have a question. My question is directed to the Prime Minister Verleden. In your speech, you made a statement about the burial sites and placing them in a better way. My question is that going to be done with the funding that you were speaking about?
One of the strong recommendations is the reinterment of the human remains, and at the same time to build a monument of stature that represents our ancestors. So it is a possibility of, I believe, 100 other possibilities that we will have. What I do want to say for public consumption, I've said it, and I don't want to hide it. I see the 200 million that is being discussed as a start. I see it as a start, in the same way that the Prime Minister has said clearly this morning that he sees a dialogue as a comma and not a dot. So I hope that as we move forward together, that we also approach the whole matter of the funding and the mentioned amount now as a comma, but there are so many areas that I believe, for St. Eustatius, that we do need the investments to rebuild our island, to rebuild our cultural institutions, and by extension, rebuild our economy, and give this island a broader perspective in what we can offer potential visitors to our island. I'm already linking culture and heritage to tourism development and broadening the tourism as well as the product offer that we have in St. Eustatius. So there are so many links and connections that we can make. We can maybe, as a result of investments, end up having more field trips and more students who are coming here to do research. We can even have a kind of archaeology based on our island, as we've had in the past. We may be able to offer station students the possibility to study anthropology and archaeology, because again, I think my colleague Simmons is, as far as I know, the only station who has a background in anthropology. But when you look at the wealth of our history, our culture, we need to have many more young stations who are going to pick up the mantle. Because one of the highest criticisms we give each time is that persons are coming from the outside with the intention to help us, and sometimes we criticize them while we ourselves are not creating that cadre of professionals who can take that up. So it's a chicken and an egg situation, but we now have to embrace the opportunities that are before us and to also put action to what we want to achieve as an island. So the opportunities, in my view, are diverse, but together as Statia, we still need to have that conversation.
Thank you very much. And my other question was, is this something that is only going to be done in St. Eustatius, or will Saba and Bonaire also be a part of this project?
If I recall well what the Prime Minister has said, he has said that you're dealing with 6 islands and Suriname. And I think you may recall in my response I said, our kingdom is diverse, it's colorful, and it's complex. So there are going to be a lot of conversations going on with each island. So the conversations that we want to have with the Dutch central government, I want to believe those are the same conversations that Suriname, Curaçao, Aruba, St. Martin, Bonaire, and Saba will want to have. And that is why I forewarned that even when the conversation becomes complex, let us stay in good dialogue with one another, because this is not going to be an overnight. This is the beginning, the comma, and a very, very long conversation that we must have with each other.
Yeah. Just to add, and actually I couldn't agree more with what just said, but it's explicitly the idea on the second question that not only with St. Eustatius, with all the 6 islands in Suriname, just what Mrs. Alina Francis said, and that's also why there are representatives from the Dutch government on the other islands at this moment, having a dialogue like this, and also in Suriname.
Okay, we have time for perhaps 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi, good morning. My name is Pagani. For those that do not know, I work for Economy, Nature, and Infrastructure. I have just 2 things to say. The first is I'm so happy that you all have decided to now give an apology. And as we said, we don't know if we're going to accept it, but we are open. And I just have one thing. I was disappointed that none of the new commissioners said something in the beginning of the speech. I find that should have been incorporated in this. That's my disappointment. And another thing is when we got Emancipation Day free, we had to give it another day for Carnival. And Carnival is also important for the people in Station. And I find that was very disappointing that you have to give in something to get something. I mean, it is always good to give it and to get. But I find Emancipation Day should have just been given to us as Station people because we know how important it was and what reason it was for. And that's all I have to say.
All right.
Can I respond? Thank you for that question and the statement. I do want you to know, though, Ms. Perla, that the statement that was read by the government commissioner was a statement that had the full input of Commissioner Glenn Smith and Commissioner Derek Simmons. We crafted that carefully, very carefully. We chose every word carefully, not stepping ahead of our people, acknowledging the response, because acknowledging the fact that we here on St. Eustatius still need to have that internal dialogue. So that is why the message was crafted as it was crafted. I also want to say with regard to your sentiment expressed regarding Emancipation Day and the trade-off for Carnival Monday, take into mind that even if you go forward and you decide that you want another day, take into account it is established by law the number of vacation days that you normally have. And so at the same time, take into account that each time there's an extra day added, it has financial consequences for the sector. Those are conversations that we can have in the future, but the decision that was taken for 2021 under what you call gedoogbeleid and in 2022 as official, that was the way to achieve it now. But if going forward in the future representatives want to reopen the dialogue, they're free to do that. But what was important was to achieve the day, Emancipation Day, which was also a request of the Island Council of St. Eustatius. I believe it was in May 2017, a motion was passed in the Island Council for Emancipation Day, July 1st, to be officially recognized.
Sorry, Mrs. Simmons.
Hello.
Yeah, I believe that when we look at the approach, that's why I said, action speaks louder than words. We have to more look at the bottom-up approach. Because when I listen to certain things, things were proposed with having a memorial site and things like that. But do you have the consent for the community, especially the persons of African descent? Do you, who are the ones basically taken advantage of? And if you do not keep that approach in mind, I think next year around this time we'll be here apologizing again. So, to the answer of the young lady there or whatever, I don't believe what's going to happen is written in stone. But I believe with the combination of, and I term it community consent, that this is what it's going to be. And then you present it and work from there. And I agree that a day like Emancipation Day should have been free from the onset. And we shouldn't be here discussing about a public holiday. Just like Kingdom Day. It's a free day, but people don't really acknowledge it. So those are things that, they sort of become meaningless if you do not have that community consent.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
I have a question first before I make my statement. I would like to know, this 200 million that I'm hearing swing left, right, and center, is this the 200 million that's going to be divided among the 6 Dutch islands and Suriname?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It's actually 100 million will be allocated to the fund, and 100 million, and the fund, of course, will be used by the 6 islands and Suriname, and for the other 100 million, it's from every ministry, every department has allocated some money for projects in the upcoming years. And then again, the money is made available, but then in close bottom-up, and I fully agree with everything has been said about it, bottom-up, these projects have to be developed, not only here, but also on the other islands. And then, yeah, nothing is written in stone, because it's not so much about the money, it's much more about the process which we're going to go through and how we are going to build it up. And then that was also going back to the first question, that is something for the long term, and in my opinion should be regardless which cabinet is ruling. That if you look, let's say, from now on, 10 or 15 years from now, then hopefully we have together worked out per island and in Suriname on a basis where we look back in 10, 15 years from now to this day today, that we say, well, we are much better off in the dialogue, and we are building a common future. So this is really taking into consideration the apologies which have been made by the Prime Minister today. That's the answer on that question.
Can I, with your permission, Mr. Moderator, give a point of clarification with regards to the recommendation coming out of the Statia Heritage research? One recommendation is the reburial of the remains, and of course, the building of a memorial. That is the broad recommendation. When it comes right down to the actual implementation, that is where you're going to need to seek the community involvement and the community engagement to determine what and how. So that 100 persons on this island were interviewed. One of the interviewers was Shomara Valentina for that report, and that were the recommendations coming out from the different voices of St. Eustatius across section of the community. If you would read the report, you would see in it the breakdown in age groups, you name it. Mr. Ishmael Berkel is here. He was a member of that first committee.
I think with my financial background, I would say financial amounts are always important, because if you take 5 million from me, and when you come back, you give me 1 million to split for 7, it makes a huge difference. So when I make my calculation, it comes down to, on average, per territory, you will end up with maybe about $27, $28 million, and not really 4 million, as you hear today. You will get the impression of this 4 million common station. That was one of my points. Thanks for the
If I immediately may react to that.
Okay.
What I meant is, when there's a good project coming and when we have the positive process, then it's not, don't fix on the amount which is just mentioned now. That could be more.
Okay.
It's more, that was what I meant it's not the finance, it's the comma, it's the dialogue which is starting, and these funds have been made available. It will be guaranteed through law. It has to go through the parliamentary process. And that will be also open for discussion, for the political discussion. So what I meant, it's not, if it only would be about the money, then we're missing also the point that we are in a common process to achieve something better than where we are right now.
I do agree with that, but everything we need to achieve, we need money for that. So that's why I went back on that. I have another question and a statement. Is this report, Ketenen and Verleden, on the government website? Where can it be found if you want to read it or look into it?
Where you can get a report. Actually, that's your question. That
Yes.
report is available. It's available on the website. We can make it also available here. I think the communication people will immediately contact, so that it is also available here on the island. Maybe Mrs. Alida Francis knows exactly how it will be distributed.
We will make sure, because I can't remember off the top of my head if it's shared. It's quite an extensive document, I think hundreds and hundreds of pages, but we will make sure that it's available. I must say though, it's totally in Dutch. It's quite an extensive report, but it's in Dutch. We'll make sure that it's shared in the government website for everyone's availability.
Thank you.
And one more question and then we will wrap up.
Thank you very much. A few points. There's talking about the money material station, and I think that if we look at the figures in Ketenen of Verleden and in historical figures, 20% of enslaved brought by boats were children under 18 years old. That means that I think that if we talk about a monument, children of station has to be a role in it. And that we don't forget that there were a lot of children on those boats. That's point one. Point two, make the funding as easy as possible. I sometimes feel a second-hand citizen from the Netherlands begging for money for funding and being treated not always what I was used to do when I was working and getting funding in the Netherlands. It's a difference, and I found it myself, and I found it really shameful. And so that's the main part. Let it be with this.
I'm happy that you raised that question. That is again one of the reasons that we carefully wrote the response from St. Eustatius, because as Executive Council, we are of the opinion that in the conversation with the Netherlands, St. Eustatius said we don't want to be bundled with everyone else. We don't want to be bundled with the rest, meaning for us it would be difficult to accept that we are part of some fund that has a name, and you have to go through the tedious process of getting your project approved or denied. We see our island now is on the verge of its development. It's exploding, and we have cultural heritage on the one side, and we have economic development on the other side, and they're clashing because everything that you touch in the soil of Statia, you will encounter something of cultural heritage value. And we are attempting to find the right balance between cultural preservation, cultural heritage preservation, and economic development. So for us, we see a lot of names and organizations springing up, but we want to have the direct conversation about what Statia is entitled to. We would like to have short lines, not going through a tedious process, because we have done that for the last 50, 60 years under the former Netherlands Antilles. And we have seen over the years and the decades before we entered into this phase of the status that we now have, that millions have been returned decade after decade in what was called onderbesteed kapitaal, uninvested capital. St. Eustatius cannot deal with any further delay. Ours is an urgent matter where it pertains to culture, heritage. So therefore, these are some of the conversations we will have with the stakeholders and the Island Council, but we really strongly believe in exactly what you are saying, because it can, at times, become very frustrating considering the urgencies that we have as an island. So I do concur with you.
Okay, we need to manage our time because we need to wrap up, because the delegation has other appointments. Council Lady, you wanted to add something? Only because you're a council lady. And we have, who's that? It's Enriquez.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I feel good this afternoon because I hear the young people of Statia getting up and speaking to carry this island forward. I hope Mr. Conroy is listening good to what they are saying, because the time is now. We respect our forefathers and mothers who died in slavery, but we got to respect the young people who come in this country with no future in front of them, because they're sitting back and waiting on what our to do. We can wait from now to 50-odd years from now, as long as the people don't come forward, and the young people this afternoon, and speak out for what is happening. It hurt me when I hear that this one is degraded from her job or his job, and somebody else is putting their Statia in for the station, and nobody can move up more forward. Only we can do that. That's right. There are certain things that there is pulled back. Who is commissioner? I should ask that question, because Hara decides who is commissioner and not the people. Is there sense in going into an honor election, asking that question to the young people, as long as we can decide who is running our island? And that's the only way we can move forward. I don't want to go too far, but action speaks louder than words.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would first like to say thank you again for the apology. Like many speakers said before me, that we take it as an open forum for dialogue. Mr. Enriquez, I think you took the words out of my mouth. Our ancestors could not vote. We have the right now. They fought for the right for us to vote. They fought for a lot of things. When I'm hearing about this 200 million, it troubles me, because now it's saying that 100 million will be split in ministries, the next 100 in some fund. Again, we're faced with the type of colonialism still symbolized within that fund. We would like to have the opportunity to spend the money on what we feel as stations is best for us and when it's best for us. Going through the system, I've been in it since 2015, I'm back in it again, and it's very tedious, hard. Sometimes you're begging, you're on your knees, trying to explain why you need monies, and sometimes to get those monies is so hard, like you said, it's even harder for us. And now to see that there's some type of a relief coming, but it's still not here. So that discussion, like you said, Ms. Francis, it needs to be done, and it needs to be done before they start to distribute any funds. Because like you said, Stacia has its unique position 22 times. Besides the fact, we need to decide how and when we want to spend this money. There should be no ministries, because we go through funding and go through writing projects and all these different things for ministries to say no or yes, or therefore saying you don't meet certain requirements, and then we're Stacia, we're still where we were before. We will not see that money, we will not feel that money, and we'll still not be able to determine what's best for us. So I hope in this dialogue that this is forefront, that stations be able to determine where stations feel it best and how much we think and how much we feel. Like we should not be grouped with everyone when it comes to spending this money. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Linderdan, for this question. What I really would like to propose, and that is then a good start for the next step in the process, that we first read the letter of the second chamber, including the attachment, and this will be also part actually of the discussions in Dutch Parliament, and I would like to advise you to stand up, of course, and to say what you just said. You want to be involved bottom up from Stacia like the other islands will do. So I see it as a first next step. And please read the letter very carefully. Give your criticism. That's always good. That's part of the dialogue. And then we will get something out of it which is better than when it was before today.
Okay, that's it from the panel. All right, so that was, ladies and gentlemen, our discussion here today, our first dialogue with State Secretary Van Rij and the Government Commissioner and our Commissioner of Culture. Well, as we heard again, the many words that were spoken, basically raising voices from the past, maybe open up some old wounds, and we hear that this process is supposed to be a process of healing. And so before healing can take place, we have to answer, I guess, some of those old voices, heal many of those old wounds. I did not see today any symbol of the day. Usually when they have these days, they have a symbol that represents the day. Well, I'm going to suggest that the symbol for today will have to be the comma. Yes, and it's not, as the Prime Minister said, it's not the comma, but it's a comma for today. Because that implies that there will be more commas added as we go along in the discussion, in the dialogue. And it's going to be, I think, a lengthy discussion. Different islands with different needs, different expectations. So there will be quite some dialogue to be had, and I hope indeed that the national government structure that dialogue in a proper way with the islands so that everybody feels included and that every opinion and position is able to be put forward. So and with that, I want to thank all of you who came out here today to witness this historic day, December 19, 2022. The discussion will continue, the debate will continue, and we will hold the national government accountable. And we have a man there who we know in person that we can call and address, and so we will make him, do his work on behalf of Stacia there in the cabinet, and I know he's doing already. So once again, thank you for coming out. Thank you to the panel members and all of you who made your contribution here today. And I'm sure there will be another opportunity for us to continue the dialogue here in Statia in the near future. Thanks to everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program. I extend sincere gratitude to you all for being present here, for sharing this experience, and of course for expressing your opinions and asking your questions. Happy holidays to you, and please enjoy the refreshments that have been prepared for you.